Well, thanks everyone for joining. It's going to be a fun hour working on this still life. I have a couple oranges and a nice little tea, kind of like a teacup object. Yeah, I've been painting a lot of oranges, and I thought today it would be fun to kind of open up the peel on it to break it up a little bit and do something fun. Yeah, so I'll get started now.
Yay!
Woo. Okay.
I think this will be good because it's only one camera on feed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So far, so good, though.
Yeah. Okay, I'm looking through a viewfinder right now just to get my composition set, so I have an idea where I want to place things. Okay. So I'm going to start with just a block in, and I'm going to use a little bit of Gamsol to keep things thinned down. I'm going to get just a little bit of some yellow orange here. Kind of find the placement of my orange. Okay. And I'm just going for light and shadow right now. Just really trying to get the form in. I'm gonna increase the chroma in the shadow here of this orange. I want to make sure I get it vibrant enough, even though it's still in the shadow. It's still pretty warm.
I noticed you didn't tone your canvas. Do you usually paint that way?
It depends. For this, I'm gonna just go straight in since I don't have as much time, but sometimes I tone it with a light wash. Sometimes I just go right in. So it really depends on the subject matter and what you're trying to achieve in the time you have. It's always good to be flexible and adjust as you go. And that's also another really important thing, is having knowing how to start multiple ways. That's a really great way to prepare for any subject matter, because you could be flexible with how you block in, and if you want to go in with a little bit more of an accurate drawing at first, or just some value shapes.
So we have a few people from Florida here.
Awesome.
And there's people from Tennessee, Philadelphia, and do you know Dana Myers?
Yeah.
Okay, she say hi. She's there with her mom. Awesome. And Karen and Scott there too from Colorado.
Oh, hi. Yeah.
Yeah.
I recognize a lot of these names, so that's awesome.
It's good.
Yeah.
Brian is here. Kai is here. Oh, Kai was asking, what surface are you working on?
This is a double primed oil. It's a double oil primed linen by, I believe it's Classens.
Oh yeah.
And it's a nice, I think it's 13 dp, if I remember correctly. Has some nice texture, but it's not super rough. So
I think that is one of my favorite linen too.
Yeah.
I like their uneven weave.
Mm-hmm.
So fun to work on it.
Yeah, it gets that really beautiful texture in some of the dry spots.
Yeah. How about the colors you have on the palette today?
I'm using, I think people call it a split primary, which is usually a warm and cool of each color. and that gives you a pretty good flexibility to paint pretty much the full range of colors that you see. And it's a pretty standard palette. It's just cadmiums, and then alizarin crimson, transparent oxide red, yellow ochre, ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, and then this is a really nice turquoise blue. You can really punch up some nice vibrant colors with that, and then a viridian green and a green gold. And it's a pretty big palette, I guess, but I like it, at least for studio work. It gives me a nice range of color. But it's also a good exercise to work with limited palettes occasionally, just so you can mix colors and know how to arrive at things with a smaller palette.
Yeah.
And especially for traveling, that's good too.
Do you mostly paint from life?
Yeah. That's definitely, before I got too serious about art, I painted a lot from photo reference, but the more I got into it and the more people I talked to, that was probably definitely a recurring theme. And the advice I got was always to paint from life as much as possible.
Yeah.
And that's really been, I think, the most growth I've seen is from painting from life all the time, because it really forces you to interpret and understand. And if you're painting from only photos, the photo's doing a lot of work for you because it compresses the values, and the color always isn't really accurate unless you have like a perfect camera. But color is so personal to the human eye that we all see it slightly differently. So yeah, I think that would be my number one advice to anybody looking to improve, is to paint from life as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And at times it's definitely a struggle, especially with plein air work, because you're at the mercy of the elements. But it's so rewarding to work from life and see things change in front of you. I'm going to thin down my paint a little more here and almost wash in some of the tablecloth. And I'm just going to double check the value here. I think I went a little too dark, so I'm just going to adjust that. It's a pretty light color, especially it's receiving a lot of the light, so it's reflecting most of that. And it's going to be more on the cool side since I'm using a cool light source.
Oh, we have someone here from Texas and friends.
Awesome.
Yeah. This is
It's so cool to see. Yeah. It's so cool to see the wide range that streaming can reach.
Yeah.
It's amazing with technology now. You can reach across the world, and yeah, it's pretty crazy. I'm going to start to get some of my darkest dark in here, just to establish that. It's always good to, at least early on, kind of put notes of the darkest dark or the lightest light and know where they are, so you can establish value and get your value range down, because everything's relative. So if you get your darkest dark too light or too dark, it could throw off the rest of the painting. So it's good to, at least it helps me to kind of have something to base all the other values off of.
And when you do your darkest dark, you're not just grabbing black. You actually are mixing purple and then get the temperature right.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good point. I think that's one of the common beginner mistakes is using black isn't a bad thing, but you just have to know how to use it. I prefer not to use black on my palette at the time being, but it may change in the future. But I mix a lot of my darks with transparent colors. like my ultramarine blue and the transparent oxide red give a really nice, like you can get something, a very, very dark color, and it's a nice rich dark.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just used like an ivory black or something, it might feel a little off compared to the rest of the painting.
Yeah. And I do portraits, so I have ivory black on it, just kind of almost like a derivative from Dome palette, but
definitely those Dome palettes.
Yeah, but I still don't just put straight black. I have black there just so I can mix it with transparent. I use transparent oxide yellow and with white and get a really nice yellowish green for the shadows. But I still don't do just pure black. I always mix it with something else.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you can make some beautiful colors if you know how to use black and mix it in correctly, because it can give you some really nice grays and so it's always interesting to see what kind of palette different painters prefer, because the end result isn't always super dramatic if you're using a specialized palette, but it's just kind of what you're comfortable with. And once you learn how to utilize your palette to the fullest, then you can do some amazing things with the limited palette.
Yeah, and then one key is just experiment, right?
Yeah.
Don't get flesh tone out of the tube or orange, like mandarin orange yellow out of the tube. Like try to make it experiment and really learn to see.
Yeah.
And just you can learn a lot from that.
Like right here is a good example. It's it's kind of the pulpy area of the orange. Not sure exactly what it's called. It's
like when you peel, you do that little kind of I know what you're saying, like white residue thing on the right?
Yeah, it's not. It's almost almost cool. There's a nice, really cool color, especially because it's getting a lot of that cool light. So you can use that to help show the form where it transitions from cool to warm in the shadow. There's a lot of really subtle color transitions that once you really look for them and your eyes get just open to them, and I think that takes painting to the next level when you see all those subtle color variations. Especially in the transitions from light to dark. There's always some interesting color in there.
And with your work, I really admire your brush work, especially how loose they look, but then at the same time they're realistic. So let's kind of give a little bit thought on how you handle brush work and even the edges, because the person from France, it's pretty interesting that.
Yeah, that's always a really popular subject to cover, brushwork. I think, in my opinion, it's a really personal thing. It's either being tighter or being a looser painter and having more expressive brushwork. That's so personal to who you are, and there's no right or wrong in it. I like to block in. I think of it like getting the whole thing established in a very simplified way, you could say, and then towards the end you come back in with some sharper brushwork and defining some edges and putting maybe a little more detail in the focal point. And that's a good way to give the illusion of loose brushwork, because you really just start out blocking the whole thing in, and then you can refine one area, and that really works well. And the same thing for edges. It's some people prefer to have much more impressionistic loose edge work, and some prefer harder edges, but I've found that I'm drawn to some really unique edges and using different tools to achieve that, and using different brushes and having a lot of variety in the edges is one way to make it really fun and have the viewer enjoy it.
And one thing I noticed as far as your brushwork, you're not
Yeah.
really drawing, and we talk about this in almost every lesson we have, is you're not really drawing an object. Like you're not drawing the whatever that little China
Yeah.
object or the orange.
Hmm.
You're really just blocking shapes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's thinking of it as value shapes and color shapes that can really help. It really simplifies if you can just break it down to this value goes here, this color goes here, then you don't have to worry so much about painting what you think is there. You're just painting what you just see it in an abstract sense.
Mm-hmm.
So you're breaking it down to just color and value. And another thing is, even though I'm blocking in pretty loosely, I'd say, I'm still paying attention to the drawing and making sure the proportions of the objects read correctly.
Yeah.
That's something that no matter how much experience you have, it's always a struggle, and you always have to be diligent and go back and check the drawing all the time, because you can lose the drawing so fast. And that's probably the main reason why paintings don't work, is if you don't know how to accurately place your brush strokes and get your drawing in correctly, then it can fall apart. And a lot of people think it might be the colors muddy or the values muddy, but a lot of the time the drawing is what's throwing everything off.
Yeah.
Because if you start with a bad foundation, the rest just won't read well.
Does it help to do a bigger brush in the beginning so you're not noodling too much?
Yeah, definitely.
So right now
I try to work. I'm using a number 6 brush, but I'd say like number 6 or number 8. That's the smallest I'll go for a block in. Because if you can really get caught up in putting in all sorts of little shapes and details if you use too large of a brush, too small of a brush. And that just helps you really think large shapes and keep it simplified in the beginning stages.
Oh, someone's curious about your brush. So that is the synthetic mongoose one, right?
Yeah, it's a Rosemary Series 279. I don't know if it's a fully synthetic or if it's a blend between synthetic and real, but it's a really nice soft brush where you can just keep everything nice and soft towards the beginning. And it's a really amazing brush for softening edges later in the painting. I'm going to establish some of the top of this orange here. Looks like it's about here. And it comes across and blends into the shadow. There's even some almost purpley colors in the orange and the light. It's always interesting to see all the subtle color variations. There's even some greens and oranges depending on the environment they're in. So you can get a lot of nice variety in color. And it works. You can even almost push color in some ways, as long as you get the value right and it reads correctly. You can get away with a lot with color.
Yeah. Value does all the work, but color does the credit.
Yeah.
You're saying that over and over again.
Yeah.
And sometimes
It's a
people, yeah, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say it's a really good exercise to go to grayscale and just paint in black and white a couple times. So then you have to force yourself to see what the value is. And that's a really good exercise. I've learned a lot by doing those paintings.
It's funny, you just barely read my mind. That's what I was going to say is, you know, how a lot of lessons in the beginning, we make you do value studies.
Yeah.
And even limit you to just 3 values. And I actually did that for like 2 weeks straight.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard because you keep wanting to do colors and feel like, oh, I only have 3 values. But it's more and more exercise, you see how easy it is to simplify what you see.
Yeah.
And it actually makes painting stronger because you're able to make value read even better.
Yeah. It's always interesting because a lot of those beginner, at the time when we're first learning them, we always think they're so like, why do we need to be doing this? But once you're more experienced, you come back to those same exercises because that's what it's all about, the fundamental skills.
Yeah.
And if you can get those down, then that's pretty much all there is to painting. Just drawing, value, color, edge, and composition. So.
Yep. And even sometimes you'll see some teachers who will say, take this painting and then they will turn it like desaturated. So you're seeing it just in a grayscale.
Yeah.
And you will be able to see, it doesn't matter what color you put in there. If the value is right, when you desaturate it, it still looks like a painting. But if your value is wrong, once you take away all the colors, it's not going to look good.
Yeah. I was thinking that would be a fun exercise to do, just paint. I think I even saw maybe Mark Taylor did that with the, he did one where he painted just a bunch of almost random colors, but he got the value right and it's still red. It's pretty amazing how that works.
Yeah, that one, he painted basically kind of like an orange. It's a ball, like a sphere.
Yeah.
But then he just did an arbitrary color showing you, as long as your value is right, it doesn't matter what color it is. And grabbing like any color on the palette and piled it up. But then it looks like a ball.
Yeah. It's amazing.
And that's, like if you get the fundamentals right, you can go complete abstract.
Yeah.
Right? But if you don't get it right, like Kai's father, he was super realism and then he went complete abstract.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of painters, is that even abstract painters really should know the fundamental principles because that's what everybody uses. Even in full abstraction, you still use those same techniques to communicate.
Yeah. Okay, we got a good question here. Ooh. So when we're talking about value studies, do you incorporate color temperature in there? For example, like warming up or cooling down your grays for the value study?
Personally, I have tried a little bit of that using some umber and maybe like a warm gray and a cool gray, but I think the whole point, in my opinion, of a value study would just really to work on just value. So you could still do color temperature exercises, but personally, I would recommend just focusing on just value if you are going to do value exercises.
Yeah, and that's my recommendation too, is the reason why we do these single principle studies is to master that specific principle, to simplify the decision-making process. Because a lot of times we're juggling multiple things, right? Like right here, there's value, there's edges, there's composition, there's even pen application. But if we simplify it down to just value and you don't think about everything else, you really get to nail those principles.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah.
And kind of like what Brian was saying is, you want to be able to do a just black and white simple value study of the sphere.
Yeah.
So many times in so many different lighting situations that you can just basically do one from memory.
Yeah.
And like if you approach it that way, kind of like juggling the ball, right? You start with one,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can juggle one ball with even eyes closed, and you throw in another one. And before you know it, you'll be able to juggle multiple balls with eyes closed because you know them
Yeah.
so well. But if you try to start throwing in another ball while you're juggling one, then you are just really making things harder for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So right now we are about 35 minutes into it, minus maybe like the first 5 minutes setting up. So it's about half an hour.
Yeah.
So you can see how far it's gone. And what is your I would say you paint pretty much a la prima, right? There's no underdrawing. And even though it's a la prima, there's the approach where you lay every single stroke down correctly, drawing and value wise. Then you can actually paint faster than if you just start and throwing in there, ignore the drawing, ignore the value, then you may 30 minutes building it up just so you can take it down in the next 30 minutes to correct them.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of artists say that, it's like you have to slow down to get faster at painting, which is a weird way of putting it, but it makes sense the more you paint, because making it, what usually takes the most time in painting is fixing mistakes, not putting the correct thing down. So if you can just bypass that entire issue, then you save so much time.
Yeah. And your pen will look fresher too, because you're not noodling too much.
Yeah. Yeah, that way you can avoid overworking. Okay, I'm gonna get some of these pieces of peel in. And I think it's starting to read better now.
So the same person is asking if we have any suggestion on color temperature study.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I know.
Yeah, it took me a very long time to understand color temperature, because I would always push it too far. Like people would say warm light, cool shadow, or cool light, warm shadow. So in my mind, I would always think, oh, it needs to be blue for the shadow. But it's much more subtle than that, unless it's a very extreme situation. So it takes a lot. I think it's just one of those things where you have to really work at it a long time. And I think some exercises would be using north light, something that's really cool. So then you have to switch your mindset and think, okay, the shadows are going to be warmer. And just keeping it a simple study, nothing too complex. And then also doing the reverse, where you maybe use an artificial light to get a warm light, so then you have cooler shadows.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to see it. Maybe even paint the same thing in two different lighting situations. And that would force you to really see how it changes depending on the context of the light.
Yeah, and those things definitely take some time to realize them, especially it's a relative color temperature. So kind of like what you're saying just now, it's not like cold or hot. It's cooler or warmer compared to the color temperature next to it. And it's really subtle. So did you see that one backlit ball Mike did in his course?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That is kind of taking color temperature study to an extreme. So basically you put a sphere, just a pure white ball, and then you light it with the way he did it is he's got a warm light in the back and then just north light in the front. So you actually are doing a backlit ball to kind of tell the color temperature from the two different light sources. And that I would say that is a really extremely advanced study. And I'll probably suggest in the beginning just do one single light source, but do it separate, like a cool one and a warm one, and compare the two and do it several times. And the more you do it, the more you can see, and it will click. Like once you realize it, you will start seeing the subtlety.
Yeah, that's always one of I think the hardest parts of being, especially a beginning painter, is sometimes your mind and your knowledge is ahead of what you can do. So you understand the concept, but you can't necessarily execute it well. And that's one thing. It just takes a lot of time and effort and a lot of paintings and making mistakes and learning from them. So it's easy to get discouraged as a beginning painter. And I think you just have to, it's one of those things you just have to stick it through to the end. And it gets easier as you progress, but you just have to get time in and make a lot of mistakes and learn from them.
Yeah. And also when you practice, you got to be mindful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's easier if you stick to one specific topic and say, okay, today we're doing value study and that's all I care about.
Yeah.
And that practice session will come out very beneficial rather than try to take care of all different things and you get sidetracked.
Yeah.
I was going to type a response, but I thought it's easier to just vocalize it. So
yeah,
save time to type. So, like we always refer back to a lot of lessons we have on Sentient Academy. So if you really go back to kind of go, and that's kind of common theme throughout all of our curriculum is we always want to make sure that we are building your skills. And that also means you will have to kind of go through some of these necessary, but really basic stuff. Like that's how you learn. That's how, Jared or Brian Mark Taylor or Michael Mom, all these artists, they get better and better. It's simple things, but they do it a million times.
Yep. And it's hard to, there's no secret, there's no special technique, there's no medium, there's no special brush or color. It's all just understanding the fundamentals and putting in the hard work. And it's definitely, you have to really dedicate yourself to learning, and it can be hard at times because you want to you just want to be good you just want to be able to have successful paintings, but that's part of the growing pains to have all those failures and learn from them and be mindful while you're painting.
Yeah. So as far as edge work, because there's always this, and we see a lot in your work too, that lost and found, different edges.
Yeah.
Maybe you can kind of expand a little bit on that, because that seems like, to me, on top of value, color temperature, the third thing I would say that is a line that we can draw between amateur and professional work is the edge work. Yeah. You can tell if it's a amateur work just by the edges.
Yeah, definitely. That's a tricky one. Personally, I think you can almost lose, if two edges are in shadow, a lot of the time you can lose the edge into the other edge without it causing issues with it reading well. So like here, how it's just, there's not really any, I don't know if you can see it in the orange here. I just lost pretty much all that edge into the shadow, and it still reads, because if you squint your eyes down, and the shadow just is almost one value, how it flows into the next area. So that's one big area in edges. You can, that'll help you a lot if you can squint and simplify, and also establishing your hardest edge and then keeping everything else secondary to that, kind of like with the darkest dark or the lightest light. Kind of getting that keyed in. Like right now, this is going to be one of my harder edges right here, where there's that dark behind the orange. So I'm going to try and keep things softer than that, so that still reads as a sharp edge. And a lot of it, squinting down and simplifying and comparing edges, that helps a lot.
Comparing. I think that's a key word right there, is comparing.
Yeah, kinda squint and compare,
Yeah. It's not just everything loose, but you just got to compare. And like you said, I define your hardest edge, and then compare everything to that and say, is it harder than that or is it looser than that?
Yeah.
I think so earlier we talked about just drawing in shapes, like
Yeah.
abstract shapes, they can really help you with the edges too. Because a lot of times our mind is tricking us because you see an orange and you just have to draw the orange contour.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of beginners where they get stuck with the edge work is they just can't handle not seeing that end of the orange in the shadow side. They have to define that clearly.
Yeah.
But in the artistic world, you don't have to draw that. You can just lose it if you don't see it, or if that value shape, if you squint it, that kind of like the orange shadow and goes into that pot or vase or milk thingy, whatever you call it. It's a beautiful big shape, and then we just keep it that big shape instead of try to go define every single detail in there.
Yeah. That's one of the really fun things. Once you start understanding edges and how to lose shapes into other shapes, you can really have fun, and just, you can even exaggerate things. Like you could even have, I think I'm going to keep these oranges much looser and the edges a lot softer. And that way the other orange will read as coming forward.
And that's where you can really master edge work, not just to make it lost and found or everything soft.
Yeah.
A really good skilled artist like Jared here, like he's able to use the edge work to create a focal point.
Yeah.
If everything is lost and found or super soft, then it's just fuzzy all around.
Yeah. Let's see, I'm going to go a little darker in the shadow here in the foreground. I realize I think I'm just a little too light, so I'm going to adjust that now that I've noticed that.
Man, I'm excited about your live streaming series coming up, because we're going to try to make it as often, or at least like weekly, or even just several times a month.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to almost like a close study with you on a weekly basis, and they can really bring our skills up to the next level, because a lot of times you just need more of a frequent feedback, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm really excited about, that, because I think that's like an untapped market right now. Just have that real-time interaction. That's going to be, that's going to be really fun. I'm excited for that.
Yeah. Video is, kind of the next good thing, right? Because you're able to review it. And of course, the best thing is in person, of course. That's always the best thing. But as you can see, this person from France can't just fly here every week. Like this live interaction is really going to be extremely beneficial. Just we feel like we're in your studio right now because the camera is so up close.
Yeah. It's amazing what you can do now. And I think that's going to be a huge way to reach more students and interact and give them real-time advice. And it's going to be a lot of fun. More
importantly, they get to paint along, because they do need to touch their brush a bit better.
Yeah. That's another thing, is I've found myself doing it too, is getting or watching instructional videos and just watching it and not really pushing myself to actually practice what they're teaching. So I don't really get a ton out of it. So you have to make sure you really work hard and apply what you learned almost right away if possible. So it really sticks in your mind, because just watching it won't have as much, it won't really stick in your mind unless you really practice it and put time into it.
And the benefit of what we're doing is we kind of do a blend of live interaction, but then we also give you a chance to see the recording if you want to. And you will be able to go back to say, hey, I'm going to do my practice, but I can remember, or I want to see how you mix that color, and you'll come back to review it. Try to basically almost do a master copy. Which is very beneficial. And even the live streaming, it's harder to get a resolution to be super high just because the streaming. But we are gonna record the footage locally too. So when they go back to review, they will be able to see the texture. Because I can see here you got a lot of thicker texture there.
Mm-hmm.
And let's talk about texture a little bit, like as far as
Yeah.
mediums or your knife work, or how do you
Mm-hmm.
get your texture to be a bit thicker?
Yeah. I prefer just using almost straight paint a lot of the time, straight oil paint without any medium, but I do thin it with some Gamsol at the beginning of the painting usually, and then work my way up to thicker paint. And one thing that helped me a lot with my paint application is using maybe 1 or 2 brush strokes and then getting fresh paint, because you can get in the habit, I think some people call it licking the canvas, where you just keep doing the same stroke over and over and over, and that it really hurts the brushwork, and it gets rid of any nice texture that the brush leaves. So if you think, just put 1 stroke down and then leave it, mix a little more color, get fresh color, and then come back. That helped me out a lot. And it takes a little bit of time to build that habit, but once it's established, then you have it, and it's muscle memory, and you can rely on that. You get a little bit of the highlight on this orange here, and it almost has some reddish or purplish color. It's interesting. It's always interesting putting highlights on something like an orange, because you'd think they'd be more yellow or orange, but it really depends on the light source, and they can be very soft and subtle. And there might even be a little bit of reflected light in this shadow here. Okay. How am I doing on time, Keith?
Well, we have 8 minutes.
Okay. I'll see if I can get this established. Let's come in. I'm going to get this darkened back here. There's this object, and it comes across about here. I'm going to thin the paint just a little bit and kind of just wash it in there.
Oh, I totally forgot to mention you and Kai.
Oh yeah, that's going to be really fun.
On July 1st, and I think it's 2 p.m.
Yeah.
Anyways, if you guys go to Sentient Academy main page website, you will see a pop-up to register for that free event. So it's our effort to introduce you guys to our newest instructor, Kailan Q and Jared Brady here. They're going to do a pet portrait paint off. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I think it's
a lot
yeah.
of fun. Yeah. But on pet portraits, because we both have a little experience in doing those and enjoy doing those. So
yeah,
it's a good way to work on something together. And it's a fun subject, and a lot of people are interested in doing portraits of their pets, and so it's a good way to show how to do that.
Yeah, it's next Wednesday, and I actually did a pet portrait of my dog. I enjoyed it. But I want to learn how you guys do it, because you both have your own really unique style.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see. You guys will be doing the same reference, right?
Yeah. So we're going to show how we both will slightly different. We have different approaches, but we'll be thinking in the same fundamental ideas, just value, color, edge, but the way we apply it will be slightly different. So that'll be a really fun way to see different ways of thinking. And that's a really good thing about like since you're in academy, you can take from so many different instructors and get different ideas. And a lot of the times we explain the same concepts in different ways. And sometimes it doesn't click with the student. And I know it's happened to me where I've been taught something and until it was explained in a different way, it didn't click with me. So that's one of the best ways to push yourself, is to learn from a bunch of different teachers and get different points of view.
Do you normally work with palette knife?
I do towards the end of a painting. I usually wait because I have to adjust a lot of edges. So if I put a nice palette knife stroke in at the beginning, I might have to change it later on. So I like to save it towards the very end. So that way it stays as is. And it's a really fun way to put on a nice hard edge at the very end.
Yeah. And even just that, it's a different approach from some other artists, right? Some people, they would kind of use it throughout.
Yeah.
So that's what we like about all this learning experiences. You try all different approaches and then find what sticks with you, and then explore more to develop your own style or your own technique.
Yeah.
You never know until you try it or see someone do it. And really that is what art is all about, is experiment, and experiment.
Yeah, never stop experimenting, because that's how you grow and learn new things. So it's always fun to paint something how you wouldn't normally paint it, and you never know what you can learn by doing that.
Okay, we have about 4 minutes left. See if we can crimp this topic: color vibration.
Ooh.
I know.
Yeah, that's a really good topic. It's a little trickier to explain, I think, but it's just putting complementaries next to each other is one way to achieve that. Or even in your mixtures, if you don't overmix your paint when you're mixing on your palette, you can get some nice subtle variety of color, and that can add some your eyes kind of mix for you when you look at the painting, as opposed to mixing a perfect color. There's just all those subtle variations.
Like how the Impressionist artists do, right? And again, that again goes back to value.
Yeah.
Like you can mix a little bit, but you still need to keep the value right. Otherwise, it won't work.
Yeah.
You just stick out. Like that little patch of color will just stick out like every time, guaranteed.
Yeah. So that's a really fun thing to explore. And also exploring color harmony is a really good exercise too. I recently did a couple paintings where I would just limit my palette to all like colors maybe in the red family or the yellow family or the green family. And that really changes the way you see color, because everything's relative. So you have to push certain colors. And since you're limited, it really forces you to explore the full range of color. So there's so many good exercises out there that can show you and open your eyes to think differently. And I think that's one of the best things to do, is just to constantly be working on your weaknesses and experimenting, trying new things.
And today I would say it's a great success, because I've been following your work forever, and every time I try to decipher how you approach the painting, I can never figure it out. But today we get to see it firsthand.
Yeah.
And a lot of things really make sense. Like, okay, now I see how he did that. Not like in full capacity, but at least you get to see your process.
Yeah, it kind of gives you a little bit of an idea how I approach things. And and some people are more visual learners, where if they watch someone paint, they really understand how they think. But I think also talking and explaining as you go really helps, because it can help the people who learn slightly differently too. And having that interaction of being able to ask a question and get clarification on something that you might not understand is a really, really nice thing.
And we have we are really fortunate today that we have so many people watching, and they ask really good questions too. I think that's another key part is, the way we are able to bring in a group of really great students, and you guys are amazing. You practice hard and you know what questions to ask. That's another, I would say, essential part is students play another great part in that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Having a good group of students really helps because they all can help each other out.
Yeah. And that's
one thing. Yeah.
Go ahead.
In workshops, that's one thing a couple of teachers have helped teach me is look at the other students' work in the workshop because they've figured out something that you haven't yet. So you can always learn something from all the other students and help each other out.
I think that's what I miss the most is back in the days, that time spent in the studio, get to, know each other, chit chat, work together, critique each other's work, give each other ideas. We are starting to miss that, not even with COVID-19, just with everything is online now. It's so much easier to just stay home and watch videos, but it's starting to kind of get to almost like a fatigue point. Like you want the interaction, you're craving that interaction.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're coming up on the end now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a really fun stream. Really thankful that everybody stuck around, even though there's some technical issues at the very beginning, but that's always something we run into. So we've kind of gotten used to having to solve on the fly.
I know.
But, yeah.
I would say turned out pretty good because we have minimum lagging compared to the other one. Yeah. So, well, thank you, everybody. We have pretty much like 40 people throughout the whole time, and it's only been less than an hour, but you can see how far he's gone. It's amazing.
Yeah. So if I was to continue painting this, well, I think I'll probably finish this, but I just the first thing I'd probably do is just go back to the drawing, make sure things are accurate, then probably double check value in areas, and then just keep refining the focal point here of this little cup and the orange. And thanks everybody for watching. It's been awesome.
Yeah, and don't forget to follow Jared on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll be I'm working on a couple things for Sentient coming up, so that's really exciting. And the stream, make sure to tune in for the stream with Kai. We'll be doing that pet portrait on July 1st. So yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, everybody, and take care. Stay safe.
Yep.